Lesson number 105 is called Evaluating Powers of Negative Bases. And we know when we have a power, it's made up of a base, the number on bottom, the big number, and then our number up high, it's called a superscript, which is our exponent or our power. So in this problem, if we've got negative 3 to the second power, that means we're going to have to multiply negative 3 times negative 3. And negative 3 times negative 3, that must be positive 9. And we've got our answer. The next problem is a little bit different. We've got negative 3 squared. Now in this problem, it's different because we want to say 3 squared first before we work with the negative. It's a really important distinction to make. If the negative sign is not within a parenthesis, it shouldn't go with the number when we take it to its power. So this problem is like saying negative 3 squared, because we've got to do 3 squared first before we work with the negative. So 3 squared is 9, and we must have to put the negative out in front, so we get an answer of negative 9. These problems, they might look similar, but we get completely the opposite answer. And the reason is based on if there's a parenthesis around the number in a negative or not. So you got to be really, you got to have good observational skills as you work through this type of problem. Let's look at a few more examples. We want to evaluate a squared if a is equal to negative 4. Now we know whenever we substitute a value in for a variable, we have to put it in parentheses. So a is negative 4, so we're going to get negative 4 squared. So it's in parentheses, that means we're going to multiply negative 4 times negative 4. Negative times a negative gives us a positive, so we get an answer of positive 16. Let's look at problem B. Here we've got the same information except a negative sign out in front. So that negative sign goes out in front. Then we've got our parentheses for the a and we square it. A is negative 4, so we substitute that in to our parentheses for a. Negative 4 squared, well, we just did that one, we know it's 16. But we've got this negative out front that we have to consider, so we're going to get an answer of negative 16, because this negative makes it the opposite of positive 16. Let's look at another example. Here we have to evaluate. And remember, the most critical thing when you're doing here is to make sure you use parentheses before you substitute your value in. So we're going to get a squared, and I'm just going to make my parentheses first, minus a b squared minus b squared. So the first two parentheses are a. So that's negative 2. So we get negative 2 squared minus negative 2. The b's are our next two parentheses that are open, and they should both be negative 3. Now we'll go ahead and simplify. Remember our order of operations. Parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide, add and subtract. So, everything within parentheses is simplified. We can't do any of the operations in there because there are none. So we need to do exponents next. Negative 2 squared means negative 2 times negative 2, which must be positive 4. Minus, then we have negative 2 times negative 3, but negative 3 is squared. We have to do the exponent first before we do the multiplication, because the exponents come before multiply and divide. So negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3. That must be positive 9. Minus, then we have negative 3 squared again. That must be positive 9 again. Now, we'll look at our multiplication. We've got 4 minus negative 2 times 9. Well, that must be negative 18 minus 9. We've got a double negative. We know we can take a double negative because the opposite of a negative is a positive, and we're going to say 4 plus 18 rather than minus a negative. And then we'll subtract 9 from that answer. 4 plus 18 is 22, and 22 minus 9 gives us our final answer of 13. We can box it, and we can move on to the next question. Key things in this problem are using parentheses before you substitute a value in, and making sure you work in the correct order of operations. Specifically in this problem, meaning you do your exponents before you do any multiplication or division. Lesson practice will be on page 327. Make sure you've got your notes complete, and I'll see you during our next class.